never really got crowded during my stay here.
Oh, really? Hey, Dolphins here. Hippie, how are you? That's okay, Dolphin. If you only got through half the update, mate, we're about to go through it here anyway. So, all good. All right, I just want to make sure on Facebook as well. And I think we should be. Just got to make sure of that. Gary's on. G'day, Gary. How are you? Hopefully we're all ready to go. Hey, Fee. Yep, Facebook must be on because I'm getting the stream from Facebook now, so that's good. Beautiful. All right, I think we're good to go. G'day folks, Chris Nitzo, Weather IQ's lead forecaster. We're a fairly large social media team, so a lot of the time when you think it's me on social media, it's not. It's a lot of the other boys and girls working. This update, so I do a lot of the forecasts for the subscribers, folks. So and occasionally I'll come in and chime in with the occasional Facebook post. This update is always brought to you by Fair Dinkum Builds Townsville, our major sponsor on the top left-hand side there. So if you are in the market for a Shed Safe accredited shed, check Fair Dinkum Builds Townsville out, and they can also deliver Shed Safe accredited shed kits. And if you'd like to support what we do, we have a subscription service, and it's weatheriq.com.au/subscribe, and it's $32.95 a year for all my forecasts, and we do quite a number of them. Today, I think, was an easy day for me, so only 6 forecasts today. iWall Pro gets you all access to all of our weather graphics as well, and that's $69.95 a year. So for those that are willing, able to support us, thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy your subscription. For those that don't have the financial means to support us, by all means, just like or unlike the video. I don't care what you do, whether you like or unlike, just interact with it in some way, and that helps the Facebook algorithms and the YouTube algorithms do their thing. All right. If you don't interact with it in any way, it doesn't really help us much. All right. So interact, whether you like it, don't care. Just interact with it in some way. All right, let's get stuck in. So we've got a tropical low that's currently located, let's have a look how far away. Let's put the ruler out. Cairns, oops, we're not going to see that there. Let's have a look this way. About 1,400 k's from Cairns, probably about the same from Townsville, and from Mackay, the system is about 1,300 k's from Mackay. So it's a long way away. And it's not going to move very quickly in the next little while either, because I'll explain why in a second. But basically, we had an upper trough that was holding it in play. Now, remember, it had 2 hurdles to overcome to get to the coast. The first hurdle was tonight, the upper trough to the south of it. It's gonna beat that hurdle, no problems. Second hurdle was Thursday night, Friday morning. There was another upper trough coming through southeast Queensland, extending up into the Coral Sea. It's going to beat that, no worries. Why is it going to beat both of those? Because it's staying in the far northern Coral Sea. So all systems go for a coastal impact. Coastal impact expected between Lockhart River and Cooktown, and then the system won't stuff around. It'll continue moving in a westerly direction. We're very confident about all of that. Where we start to lose confidence is what it starts to do in the NT and WA. Does it continue all the way west through WA and out to sea, or does it try and sort of hang about and just miss coming off the west coast? But basically, we're expecting a cyclone to form off the coast of Queensland, hit the coast of Queensland, reform in the Gulf, hit the coast of the Northern Territory, reform in the WA, eventually potentially hit the coast of WA. All right, so basically we're expecting 3 different impacts or 3 different landfalls of a tropical cyclone system. One here, and one further to the west. All right, without further ado, let me talk you through some of the technical aspects of this by playing a recording of what we sent out to the members. Our subscribers get these every single day. You guys get them when I've got to protect my voice. So we're going to do that for the technical aspects, and then I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about on-the-ground effects, okay? So we're going to start with the technical stuff, so you know which way it's moving and why we're so confident about everything, and then I'm going to take you through the on-the-ground effects. What can you expect in Cairns? What can you expect in Cooktown? What can you expect in Groot Island? What can you expect in Darwin? Those sort of things, all right? So let's go through the technical stuff first, and this is a pre-record. So listen to this. I'm going to stick around in the background, but just have a listen to this so you're understanding where we're coming from and why we're confident about everything in this system. Okay? The first 4 minutes talks about the next 48 to 72 hours while the system's first forming. The next 10 minutes talks about the approach and over Queensland. And then the last 7 minutes talks about the NT and WA part. And then the last 2 minutes talks about another system in the Coral Sea. Okay? So it goes for 22 minutes. Then I'm going to come back to you with on-the-ground effects. Okay? Good evening, folks. Welcome to a Tropical Low 34U update this evening, looking at the technical and track forecast of this system. The system is expected to now become a tropical cyclone, 60% risk. I think the Bureau are topping it out at, so maybe a little bit higher than that. No, about 60%. And then developing into a cyclone before hitting the coast in Queensland, and then redeveloping into a cyclone before hitting the coast in the Northern Territory, and then continuing to track in a westerly direction through the weekend and into early next week. And we'll be discussing its longer term future as well for WA folks. So it'll be a 3-stater. It'll be Queensland, NT and WA. We just don't know how much of WA it's going to affect. System continues to show some pretty deep convection on the northern side of the circulation and well to the east of the centre of circulation. The idea at the moment is that we've got an upper trough to the south of the circulation, which is stopping it from moving west for now. That upper trough is going to let go at some stage tomorrow around about lunchtime tomorrow. We expect that upper trough to begin letting go, and by tomorrow night the cyclone should be steadily on its march westwards. Now initially it may not intensify quickly, and the reason being that we just see a little bit of wind shear over the top of the circulation tomorrow, and then as the cyclone starts to move to the west later on tomorrow, we will see it move into a nicer shear environment or a lower shear environment. But for the moment, with the upper trough around and the possibility of a little bit of dry air just being pulled into the cyclone from the south, and you can sort of make it out here on Tuesday Monday night into Tuesday as the upper trough pushes to the southeast of the circulation. You can see this little dry tongue of upper level air, this green and yellow shading on the southwestern side of it. Now eventually that will go away, but it is going to take a little bit of time for that to go away. So once that does go away later on Tuesday and Wednesday, the system should begin putting itself together. Now we have a little bit more let's say technical issues with the system to start with. You can see that the system is going to be underneath one of those tuts again. Remember the tut that the last silly thing had? So the same thing's happening here. We've got a tropical upper tropospheric trough that doesn't quite line up with the circulation as it tracks to the west. So it's in one of those real marginal situations where the tut can really help it. If it forms here on the southern edge of the tut, it can really help it to intensify. But if it forms just south of that, or if it tracks just south of that, we're going to have some issues with regards to wind shear, just like we did with the last one. So you can see here that the system is starting to put itself together on the southern boundary of that tut. Now, really, really importantly, is it on the southern boundary of the tut where we've got 300 hectopascal easterlies at 40 knots, or is it underneath the tut? If it's underneath the tut, happy days, we're going to see westwards. And so when we take a look at our MSLP precip charts here, what we can see is that the system is producing lots of rain on the western side and the northwestern side to some degree, and that's because of the tropical upper tropospheric trough enhancing outflow on the western side of the system, but notice fairly stunted flow pattern on the eastern side, so not much by way of significant convection on the eastern side of the circulation. Now, so therefore we're probably expecting some development, but it's going to be pretty slow development. It's going to be pretty sluggish here as it struggles with those forces in play. So we've got the Tut, which is driving lots of storm activity, but it's driving it not necessarily over and around the centre. It's driving it on the northwestern and western edge of the centre. All right, so that's where all the storms will be. And for a cyclone, it needs those storms right around the circulation. So it's going to struggle a little bit for the first, probably day and a half once it starts moving west. So we get to about Wednesday night, Thursday. Now you'll notice there it just starts to tighten up. So let's get a little closer to Queensland. Let's have a look at the dynamics in play as it gets closer to Queensland. So our service winds, and I'm going to take us right out to about Thursday morning here where it does start to tighten up. So there it is there. So Thursday morning, the system's starting to tighten up. It's probably only about 12 to 18 hours away from landfall there, and we'll talk about landfall and timing shortly. But I want to show you some structure shots here. 300 hectopascal winds. You can see that the Tut is still in play. All right, so it hasn't quite tightened into an upper low, so the upper part of the system is still at the mercy of the Tut. Now, once again, if the cyclone finds itself closer to Cooktown / Port Douglas, it's going to find itself in a pretty ordinary environment. If the cyclone finds itself in here, it's going to find itself in a beautiful environment. So do you see the fine line that we're dealing with there? So when it comes to intensity forecasts, we're seeing that the further north the system stays, the more likely it is to intensify a little sharper, being underneath that tropical upper tropospheric trough there. If it goes a little further south down towards, say, the Daintree or Cooktown, which we don't expect, but could happen, we would then see a system that unravels very quickly on approach to the coastline, given the fact that we've got such strong upper level wind environments. You can see that our upper winds are around 40 to 60 knots. So as far as Cairns goes, we're not worried. All right. As far as Port Douglas goes, look, from a significant rainfall perspective, absolutely. Once the system crosses the coast, we would see a beautiful moisture flow onto the coastline. So from that perspective, we would be concerned. But from a strong tropical cyclone perspective, if it drifts that far to the south, it's going to have to encounter all of this high amount of vertical wind shear or very strong easterly flow through this region, plus what we call upper level convergence. Now, convergence you normally associate with really rainy conditions, but in the upper levels of the atmosphere, upper level convergence is lethal to tropical cyclones, and as in it tries to murder them before they've had a chance to do much. On the opposite side, upper level divergence is really healthy for tropical cyclones. So you can see it's a fine line here. The Tut just complicates the matter significantly when it comes to intensity estimates. Without the Tut, we'd say that the system would intensify to about a Category 1 or Category 2. With the Tut, we might see a rapid period of intensification as high as 3, or if it drifts a little bit south of the Tut, we might see a situation where the cyclone weakens considerably and hits the coast as a low. So you can understand why we've got a few issues there, given that complex upper level pattern with regards to intensity estimates of the cyclone. Now you'll notice the upper tropospheric trough still lingering about as it pushes into the Gulf. You will notice though it is weakening. You'll notice there the easterly flow, see that really strong easterly component flow, does start to weaken as it pushes into the Gulf. Doesn't mean the system's going to slow down so much because the deep layer flow is still very strong, but it does mean that vertical wind shear may decrease when the system is over the Gulf. So there is a chance there that we see a greater period of intensification once the system gets into that western Gulf, assuming the Tut is weakening at the time. So you can see there we've got a few issues, right? It's not a clean mill of health all the way to the coast and away we go and we're going to turn into a 5. All right, there's a few issues there. Could we see rapid intensification? Absolutely, especially if we stay a little closer to Lockhart River than Cooktown. If we stay up a little bit further to the north, there could be a period of rapid intensification. If we stay on the south side, there's probably not going to be much hope for the system to develop into a tropical cyclone if it comes down as far south as, say, Port Douglas, Daintree, Cairns area. All right, so there's a nice little sweet spot where it's not rapidly intensifying, but it's also not getting sheared away completely, and that sweet spot is around Cape Melville, which is where the system is expected to head towards, or give or take about 50 to 100 k's either side of that. All right, so Cooktown is still well and truly in the firing line in that setup because they're going to be on the south side. Even though the system is going to be getting sheared to some degree, Cooktown should still be able to see some fairly strong winds out of it, possibly cyclonic winds out of it around Cooktown itself. All right, so structurally we've got issues. It's not a clean bill of health. It's not a really clear-cut example of a cyclone intensifying rapidly on the coastline. Some of the models want to overly simplify it. Some of the models want to keep it way too weak. All right, so I think the sweet spot at the moment is a weak to on the weaker end of a tropical cyclone if the system can get near the Tut and not on the south side of the Tut. If it's south side of the Tut, it'll just get sheared away the whole time all the way to the coast. Right, so that Tut changes the rainfield dynamics as well. So not just from the perception of what's going to happen with regards to intensification, but it also changes who gets the rain. So normally in these setups, we get the rain on the south side. We went through this last cyclone, remember, last low, where we talked about the idea that the Tut was going to just change where the rain was going to be. And you can see the same thing here. The Tut and the easterly shear is driving a lot of our heavier rainfall on the western side of the circulation. Not on the south, on the west and perhaps slightly northwest of the circulation. That's where all of our vertical wind shear is taking our deep convection and pulling our deep convection. Notice that the eastern side of the circulation, the area where it's just gone through, has very little rainfall, right? So it's the rain precedes the cyclone on the cyclone track because of the structural dynamics of the atmosphere at the time. All right, so you can see here that we're getting all of our heavy rain on the western side of the circulation. Now, there is heavy rain to the south, but that heavy rain stems from the orographic lifting effect, the pre-cyclone impact. You can see the orographic lifting effect is what's creating the heavy rain down here, but it pales into insignificance compared to the deep convection, absolutely incredible convection that'll be going on that western and northwestern side underneath the tropical upper tropospheric trough, all right, or the Tut. Now, as we push onto the coast, you'll notice now the rainfall beginning to get stronger and heavier around the north tropical coast, and that's because on this part, we're getting this deep tropical moisture flow, and you can see it all the way down to Townsville and the Burdekin potentially. So we've got this deep tropical moisture flow onto the coastline here temporarily, and then after the cyclone pushes to the west, we then get a convergent flow pattern happening right on that north tropical coastline. All right, so there's potential there for a few days of solid rainfalls. Now, once again, the structural dynamics of the cyclone don't lend themselves to seeing extremely heavy falls on that northeast coastline. So we need to temper our expectations to some degree about the rainfall potential. Obviously, a cyclone that hits a little closer to Cooktown will be sheared more, but also offer up more opportunity for this area between Cooktown and Cairns to pick up heavy rainfall. All right, so that's our structural dynamics on approach to the coastline. Our speed of motion has also increased, so we expect the system to hit the coast on Thursday afternoon night now instead of Friday morning. So that has certainly changed in the last 12 to 18 hours, and we're seeing that in a number of computer models here that the system is making landfall, likely to the north of Cooktown and to the south of Lockhart River, and it's making landfall around Thursday afternoon / night, overnight, Thursday night, Friday morning. So this gives it a little bit less time over water to intensify as well. And when we take a look at our different and various modelling, you can see there that we sort of max out at around about a Cat 2 there on the old generation models. On the new generation models, we max out at around a Cat 3. And on the Euro modelling, we just drop back a little bit further southwards and we max out at about a Cat 1 on landfall on the model average. Okay, so you can see there are some variations in the intensities, Not a hell of a lot of variation in crossing location. Cooktown to Lockhart River, and we can already narrow that down this far ahead of time, and that's pretty impressive when it comes to modelling this sort of stuff. To get it down to that sort of error margin at this sort of range, yeah, that's pretty impressive. Okay, so initial strike there Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, or very, very early Friday morning, and then pushing very quickly across the Cape. It doesn't stuff around, folks, and the reason it doesn't stuff around, let me draw your attention to the steering mechanisms. Right, our mid-level ridge is perched over Queensland. That guarantees the system hits the coastline in Queensland. An upper trough tries to erode that ridge, but the cyclone is too far north of the upper trough. That was our big threat on Thursday. Remember, we had two threats that keep this system off the coast. There was this, the first trough right now. The system's too far north of the first trough, which is happening right now. And then there was this second trough around Thursday, Friday, and the system's going to be too far north of that second trough. You can see the weakness in the ridge down around Townsville, but there doesn't appear to be any weakness in the ridge further to the north. So the system is going to hit the coast. Now, from here, our mid-level ridge redevelops or develops but retrogrades west. So basically the centre of the ridge moves a little further west. So that means we've got a powerful east to west motion continuing for this cyclone all through the next X number of days, and we can see that retrograding ridge, or that retrograding centre of the ridge, continues to make sure that the system travels in a primarily westerly direction. So if the ridge was staying over Queensland, what we would see is that after the system hit the Queensland coastline, it would start moving a bit more southwest. But you can see here that the ridge is positioned in between Exmouth, Onslow and Alice Springs, and there's no sign of a weakness in that ridge. So this cyclone is going to power through the Gulf and then power through the Northern Territory. Then the big question mark is, does it get out into the Joseph Bonaparte? And if it does, how well structured is the cyclone at the time? So we should only see a fairly minimal southerly motion on this westerly motion, on this westerly track. So you can see there the system clearly gets into the Gulf, then continues into the Northern Territory, and then we have a situation where the system may get, in some of the more northern solutions where they've got an even stronger ridge, it may get off the coast as far north as just north of Port Keats. Heck, there's even a couple out near Darwin, but that's too far north. But maybe off the coast of Port Keats there, it would only, if it maintained a fair bit of structure, and it looks like it'll be structurally pretty sound on the way west, the idea would be that the system may develop into a weak tropical cyclone again in that 6 or 12 hour period. It might get over water. Now, the model average tells us it'll stay over land. So let's hypothetical that out and continue with that thought that the system stays over land, doesn't become a tropical cyclone in the western parts of the Northern Territory. Our focus then becomes, we know that ridges this time of the year, they can't last forever. There comes a time where the ridge will either reposition itself, just like it does over the course of the weekend, where it repositions itself in Western Australia, from Queensland to Western Australia. And there comes a time where they sometimes break down due to the development of frontal systems. This is the time of the year where we start to see upper level troughs, upper level lows. They all start to come back as we move from the wet season to the dry season. So in this transition phase, what we're looking for here is, as the cyclone gets off the coast on Monday or Tuesday off the WA coast, what we're looking for here is a potential breakdown in the ridge as we move into midweek of that week and beyond. Now, if the ridge breaks down early enough, we'll see a pretty sharp recurvature down towards Karratha, Onslow, Exmouth. If it doesn't break down, or it breaks down, say, late in the week, then we're probably looking at a recurvature well west of the coastline, minimising the risk to WA. The remnants of which may then come onto the southwest or western, or southwest or central western coastline as we go into the end of that week or into that weekend. All right, so there's a fair bit of, you can see how we start to get a lot of variabilities and errors as we start to move into this longer term time frame as we get to days 8 to 10. But what we can see very, very clearly is that this upper trough is going to miss our cyclone. It's going to move west. There's going to be a period there where it's undergoing some wind shear. One of the key things with that wind shear too, remember, it's a fairly strong easterly shear pattern, but
the system's moving east to west as well, so it's offsetting some of that vertical wind shear to some degree. So I don't expect wind shear to be the be-all and end-all when it comes to this system on the approach to the Queensland coast and through the Gulf of Carpentaria. I think it will be a limiting factor to some degree, but I think the fact that the cyclone is moving in the same direction as where the shear is coming from is going to offset that shear to some level anyway. And the one last interesting thing on that initial approach to the Queensland coast is going to be this upper level trough. Does it help to enhance the outflow? So even though the wind shear might be moderate around the cyclone, the idea is maybe the outflow here being enhanced poleward by this upper trough may also give that system just that extra little boost it needs to get a little stronger on approach to the coastline. Obviously, the big talking point, friends, is the possible breakdown of the ridge here as we move into next week, at the back end of next week. And you can see that there are signs, there's just elements there of the ridge repositioning a little further east, little further west, and there might be just enough of a weakness in that ridge in between, and especially if there's any sort of upper troughing for Western Australian folks, there might be just enough there to drive the system in a southerly or southeasterly direction. So watch this space if you're in WA. Don't just assume this is just a Queensland thing or a Northern Territory thing. We're not seeing that ridge going anywhere, so we're seeing a pretty high likelihood that the system will get off the WA coast. We just don't know, will it recurve back in time or will it continue too far to the west? That's what we're tossing up at the moment, not necessarily tossing up whether or not it's going to get off the coast. We've got a reasonably high confidence level that the system is going to get off the coast, which is pretty impressive. And as I say, it's a three-stater: Queensland, Northern Territory, yes I know it's a territory, it's not a state, and WA. Queenslanders in behind this one, there's going to be another one. It's a complex area of low pressure that's developing in the northern Coral Sea. At this stage, we're expecting that to develop probably as early as, maybe even the weekend into early next week. From there, the system is expected to adopt a south to southeasterly track. And you can see in the majority of models, we're keeping it well offshore and we're pushing it down into the graveyard to some degree. All right, so we will need to watch it because the pattern is quite complicated, but at this point in time, it does look as though we're going to see an upper level trough next week through the western Coral Sea, and that may give us just a bit of a force field around Queensland, keeping that system well out to the east. But there is a second system brewing out there. It's going to be pretty complicated. It's going to be pretty weak, I would imagine, given what we see at the moment with regards to the pattern out there. And for now, it's nothing to worry about. But we'll let you know if that changes over the course of the week. But just be aware, we haven't lost sight that there's something else brewing out there longer term. But we're just not that interested because all modelling points to that staying well and truly out to sea. Have a good night.
Alrighty. Ooh, let's turn that down. Alrighty, so hopefully that's given you an understanding of why we're confident about what we're confident in and also what we're not confident in. All right, because it's important to know what we don't know. And one of the things we don't know is exactly where that system is going to be perched with regards to the tropical upper tropospheric trough. And we know that that's going to be a very finicky situation where we could see a system that really strengthens on approach to the coast, especially this last 100, 200 Ks on approach to the coast. We could see a system that's really strengthening in that last 6 to 12 hours, depending on that position of the tut in combination with the upper trough down to the south of Queensland. Then we're going to see a re-strengthening of the system as it pushes towards Groot. So firstly, let's talk about the effects that we might be able to experience in Cooktown, Cairns, and up towards ground zero. So we're going to use the Cooktown overlay. Don't think there's too much to talk about there for Townsville. You did notice in the forecast, I did mention Townsville as probably the southern edge of where we might see some of that squeeze, some of that convergence. I don't think it's necessary to talk about them specifically. I think the area that we need to talk about is from about Lockhart River through to about Tully, maybe Ingham. So let's have a chat about that area. and let's have a look at what sort of effects we're going to see out of this. And we're going to use, because we're still a little bit out in terms of time frame, it's still 4 or 5 days away, so we don't want to get too specific about exactly what happens and when, because we might be off with that with regards to timing and intensity. But what we're looking for here are some generalisations. And what we can see is fairly fresh to strong southeasterly winds on the lead up to this thing, all right? So the whole week is basically a write-off if you're a boatie, southeasterly winds, big waves, etc., etc. We'll talk about winds first, and then we'll come back and talk about rain. Now, the system itself, it's very important to understand that while the rain field is going to be primarily located on that western and northern side, the actual system itself is creating most of its winds on the southwestern side. So you'll notice there, and this is important, if we take the radius of the gales there, it's about 150k radius on the south side versus almost no gales on the northwestern side, even though that's where we're probably seeing some of our strongest convection. And you can see only a gale field of about 50 or 60 kilometres on that northeastern side. So do you see how it's a little bit lopsided, or what we call asymmetrical? So that means that the winds aren't exactly compact right around the circulation at this point. Now, it is getting better on approach to the coast. You see that part? See this is the part that concerns us a little bit. That last little bit here, that last 6-hour, 12-hour period, that does look as though it's a system that is trying to put itself together at the last minute, and it does look as though, as I said, if it's a little bit further north, it may be able to encounter that slightly more favourable Tut environment versus, say, something that decides it wants to get closer to Cooktown, in which case it may not necessarily be quite as well put together. And so in here we can see that we're sort of maxing out at around Category 2 winds. It's only a very brief period of Category 1 and 2 winds though. So the system is moving at a great rate of knots. So let's try and figure out a rate of motion here. So in 6 hours in the model here, in 6 hours, good on you, Nitso. In 6 hours, the system has moved about 150 kilometres. All right, so that means the system is coming through to the coastline at about 25 kilometres an hour. Now, if you have a gale radius that's around about, if you think about this from a mathematical perspective, if you have a gale radius that's 150 kilometres wide on this southwestern side, at 25 kilometres an hour, what do you got? You got about 6 hours worth of gales, or 6 hours worth of really damaging potentially destructive, if we're at Cat 2, potentially destructive winds. Now, remember, the destructive wind core is only very small, so that destructive wind area is only about 50 k's from the centre. So you've only got about 1.5 to 2 hours of possible destructive winds. So it's a pretty violent but very quick thing. So it's not going to be something that's going to linger on. So disruptions will be minimal. You can see for Cairns almost no disruption there. So I wouldn't be expecting any major disruptions for Cairns whatsoever. All right. For Cooktown, yeah, if the system, especially if the system hits more around Hopevale, around a little bit further southwards, say south of Cape Melville, for Cooktown, they might be just on the edge, maybe for an hour or two of that gale radius. So it is important to understand the forward speed of the system is really important here. It's not going to stuff around, and it's not a very big system. But by Coral Sea standards, the system's going to be quite small. All right, this is more of a system that we'd expect to see in WA. That's the size of the system anyway. All right, so we do see the system quickly moves onto the coastline. Now, this is what's interesting from a rain perspective. If you're in northeast Queensland, around about Thursday night, Friday morning, we're going to start to see this northerly, northeasterly, southeasterly coming onto the coast, and they're going to be squeezing together. And that's what's going to start to create the heavy rain here. The cyclone itself is a toothless tiger on the south side when it comes to rainfall, all right? But it's the convergence, the secondary convergence band that is creating the rainfall for the North Tropical Coast, not the cyclone. The cyclone's creating all its rain on its northern and western side of the circulation. It's the convergence around it that's creating a secondary rain field here. Let me show you what that looks like on a rain chart, so you've got an idea of what I'm talking about there. A visualised idea of what I'm talking about. All right, so what we can see here, we'll just breeze through today and tomorrow because there's just nothing there to talk about. Now, as we go into Thursday, remember that most of our rain for this thing is on the northern side of the circulation, but you will notice that as it gets directly to the north, so while it's northeast of you, you're just getting a few showers on the coastline. So this is Thursday morning, we're just getting a couple of showers on the North Tropical Coast. We're starting to get heavier showers once the system pushes due north of you. Why? Why is that so important? Well, because we're changing the flow. So the southeasterly is turning east-southeasterly. This coastline does very, very well in an east-southeasterly. Now, as the cyclone pushes further to the west, you'll see that we're changing that east-southeasterly and we're making it all up and down the coast. We're increasing the east-southeasterly all up and down the coast. So now what are we seeing? In that same period, we're seeing increasing rainfall from the Cape Melville area all the way down to Ingham as we've changed the flow to an east-southeast. So that's Thursday 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Our cyclone is producing most of its rain on the northern side because of the, what do we call it? The Tut. All right, now, the Tut continues to create significant rainfall on the northern side of the cyclone. That's this area here, Lockhart River, Cohen, potentially, depending on exactly where it crosses. Weipa will start to get heavy rain. But you'll also notice patches of heavy rain down here in the Daintree, Innisfail, Tully, Ingham area. All right, now we're going into Thursday evening here. Cyclone hits the coast, as I mentioned, sometime between Thursday, probably afternoon, all the way to Friday morning. That's our timing issue that we've got, where we're not exactly sure on the timing just yet, but sometime in that period, in that 12-hour period, we'll see the cross. Now, once the system crosses, notice that we've actually increased the rainfall after the system crosses the coast for the North Tropical Coast. So the Kasserine Coast, the Daintree Coast, start to see increasing rainfall at this point because what's happening? If you take a look at our surface winds, at this point, we've got this deep tropical air mass coming in, and that's interacting with this drier, more stable air mass through Townsville. And so what's happening here is that they're meeting. The meeting point is a broad area between Cooktown and Ingham. And so where those air masses meet, we see significant rainfall potential and heavy rainfall potential. So this really heavy rain potentially kicks off around North Tropical Coast from as early as Thursday morning in the Innisfail area and then branches out right across the region as we go to Thursday night. And then we start to see some of that push inland, but not a lot. Remember, the cyclone is creating, this is the important part, the cyclone is creating most of its rain on its northern side. All right, not on its southern side. The rain here is associated with the convergence hitting the big mountain ranges. So that means the tablelands are on the other side of those big mountain ranges. They're in a rain shadow type area. Now, we can see there into Friday morning, we've got significant rainfall on that North Tropical Coast continuing in the feeder band. So there's a feeder band here, a convergence band away from the cyclone. The cyclone continues to produce most of its rain on its northern side. So if you're in Weipa, you're getting a pretty bad touch up there overnight, Thursday night, Friday morning into Friday afternoon. On the North Tropical Coast and the Herbert coastline, you're going to continue to see heavy showers coming on through Friday, and you can see there that we're only just starting to ease the rainfall a little bit Friday afternoon, and then we reform it again on Saturday morning because these feeder bands, these convergence bands, they intensify overnight early in the morning on the coast, and then they weaken through the day, and that comes down to what we call the diurnal maximum for convection over water. So what we find is that these feeder bands will strengthen at night and then they'll ease off a little bit after about lunchtime through to about that night again, and they'll kick on again. All right, so there's some pretty heavy rainfall here around the North Tropical Coast, around the Kasserine Coast and the Ingham Coast, where this little convergence band develops. Now, the cyclone's long gone. It's going out to the NT, and we'll be discussing them in a sec. So you can see, though, that it is creating significant falls of rain into Saturday through this North Tropical Coast, Herbert coastline. As we move beyond Saturday, we start to see the rainfall settling down on Sunday and progressing northwards back up towards the Daintree. And then from there, we're stabilising the North Tropical Coast. All right, so that period where we got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and to some extent breaking down on Sunday and pushing back to the north, resulting in fairly large-scale falls of 200 to 400 millimetres on that northeast tropical coastline. All right, so some pretty big rain, extending down to about Rolling Stone at this stage. Townsville looks to be on the stable side of that stable-unstable collision zone. It's close, so we'll have to monitor it. I mean, if the cyclone hits more around Cooktown, then Townsville will probably come into where Ingham is when it comes to that rainfall, and Ingham will come into where Tully is when it comes to that rainfall, all right? So it is somewhat dependent on where the cyclone goes as to who gets that secondary feeder band, but overall, you can see that's what we're anticipating. Once we go west to the tablelands, we can halve or even a third of the rainfall that we're going to see on the coastline, and once we go west of the tablelands, this is good news for places like Georgie and Croydon and those sort of areas. We're not anticipating really heavy rain to push down into that area. They're going to see a few showers for sure, but we're not going to see the really intense stuff that's been driving a lot of the flooding through the northern goldfields, upper Flinders and through northwest Queensland at this stage. That's going to stay to the north of them. Obviously, ground zero, heavy rainfall, and to the north of ground zero, extremely heavy rainfall. They will probably see the heaviest falls of this entire event, but it's also a very sparsely populated area. You've got Cohen and you've got Weeper, you've got Arakoon as well and Mapoon. So there's only a few locations there that are going to come under real threat of A, the cyclone's winds, and B, the cyclone's most intense rainfall. All right, so thankfully it is hitting an area that is fairly sparsely populated. So that's what we're expecting on the Queensland side of things. Let's quickly move into the Northern Territory, have a look at Groot, and then it's too early to talk about WA. So for those folks in WA, it's just too early to talk about you because we don't know the point of curvature. So I don't want to speculate about WA just yet. Let's just focus on Queensland, the Gulf for now. Once we know if and when the system can start to show signs of that curvature, we might be able to start talking about WA in a bit more detail. But for now, we'll leave that for another day because there's just too much going on to start with. All right, so let's go over to Groot. And let's have a look here at how this system progresses as it pushes into the Gulf. So once again, we're not expecting any real slowdown here. We may see a decrease in wind shear. No major winds on the lead up. So just really important there that you're not expecting, a big lead up to this. It's just a really violent period of weather that comes through, and there's not a hell of a lot of build up here. Remember, it's a fairly small system by Queensland standards. All right. And so the idea is the system pushes into the Gulf. It loses a bit of oomph because it had to push over the Cape for about 6 to 12 hours. And then we see the system start to re-intensify. And you can see there we think that it's going to be somewhere around Groot, give or take maybe 100, 150k to the north and maybe 200k to the south. There is a chance that it hits the coast down around Borrow, depending on the exact westerly component. So if it hits Cooktown, it's more likely to hit Borrow. If it hits up around Cape Melville, it's more likely to hit Groot. If it hits up around, say, Lockhart River, it's more likely to get pretty close to Nhulunbuy. All right, so what we can see here is the system remains fairly small. So once again, let's have a look at our gale radius of the cyclone. It's only about 115, 120 Ks. Let's have a look at our forward speed of the cyclone at this point. So it moved from there to there. 120, 130k. So still moving at 20 to 25k an hour towards the west to west-southwest. All right, so you're not going to be in the gale radius for very long. You're going to be in there for about 5-6 hours on the front side and probably 5-6 hours on the back side. That's the gale radius. And if it gets to Cat 2 and Cat 3 again in the Gulf, we can see that area of really strong winds is probably going to be very, very small. We don't have high-resolution modelling at this stage to really nut down the structure here, but we know that the system overall is going to be a pretty small system and it's going to be moving fairly quickly. All right, so we're not going to see those effects of the system for very long. They're going to be violent, but they're not going to be long-lived. And you can see there in the higher resolution modelling here how it does take a long time to start putting itself together through the Gulf. And you can see it only just starts to do it as it pushes just south of Groot there. And that's a great example there of the sort of maybe not when it comes to the track, right? We know it's going to be somewhere near Groot, but it could be south of Groot, like just south of Groot, or it could be just north of Groot. But that's a good example of the slight variability, only very slight, that we could see with regards to track. And once again, we're sort of looking at the system putting itself back together, getting to about a Cat 2 here as it gets to the coastline with gusts up around 70 knots or so. So there, once again, very, very fast motion of the system. We expect it to get there around Saturday into Saturday night, depending on the timing of impact in Queensland, but sometime around Saturday, let's say, we expect it to go through. And then we expect, now this is very interesting, this part here is really important when it comes to WA, and obviously for the amount of flooding that we've had through Katherine and through the base of the top end. The cyclone looks like it's going to hold on to a fair bit of structure here. And one of the key things is that it's going to be moving from the warm, soupy waters of the Gulf into a drenched and flooded out base of the top end. So the brown ocean effect could be something that we'll be discussing from a technical perspective later on down the track, where that may result in a cyclone that's decaying a lot slower than what a normal cyclone would decay through the top end. So there is a chance there that this system provides damaging winds all the way through to places like Katherine. And that's why when we talked about the idea of the system maybe getting into the JBG, the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, it wouldn't take that long for a well-structured system to redevelop if it pushed in that more northern solution or more northern area. From a rainfall perspective, folks, let's have a quick look at what we can expect here. Once again, it's a violent period of weather, all right? It's not a big build-up. It's not we're waiting 2 days in Groot. We're getting caned by rain and wind for 2 days before it gets here. No. It's just one violent period of weather. And you can see here that we're not expecting to see much by way of any significant build-up rain. Well, look, we're going to get our showers and thunderstorms. That's what we get at normal times across the wet season. Nothing different there. But as we start to see this system push into the Gulf, you can see it's still creating most of its rain on the northern and western side of the circulation. So as it pushes through the Gulf, it hasn't changed its structure much. Remember, the TUT, the Tropical Upper Tropospheric Trough, is still in play, enhancing the rain and storms on that western and northern side. It's just not as strong, the TUT, at this point. So as we go through, we can see the system continues to drive most of its rain on the northern and western. So if it crosses south of Groot will probably see some of the worst of the rain aspect of it. Okay, if it crosses, say, south or just southeast of Borrow will see the worst of the rain from it. All right, so just be aware there that the rain is primarily located on the western and northern side. Now, once the system passes through, we get this feeder band, and with this feeder band brings in deep tropical moisture on the eastern side, and you can see some heavy rainfall there coming through after the cyclone. So remember, we've got two things there. We've got the cyclone produced rainfall. That's the rainfall produced by the deep convective core of the cyclone. And then we've got the convergent feeder band, which isn't technically directly associated with the cyclone. You could make an argument, of course, that if the cyclone wasn't there, then this wouldn't be there. Of course, that's an argument. But it's not a directly attributable thing to the cyclone. Okay, it's not because of the cyclone's core. Very similar to why Cairns to Townsville, that Cairns-Townsville coastline is going to get pummeled, but not necessarily because of the cyclone. It's because of the secondary features. All right, so so we're seeing that element here in the Gulf. The only difference in the Gulf, we're not going to see quite as much rain from it in the Gulf because there's no big mountain ranges in the Gulf. It's very flat land. All right, and that's something that the North Queenslanders have that you don't. All right, so the system quickly moves west and then into the Northern Territory. And when we take a look at Katherine here for the Northern Territory, this is a real problem area, of course. The last thing these folks need is, 12 to 24 hours where they're getting 200 mils of rain. Once again, the big thing to understand with this cyclone is it's moving fast. All right, and it doesn't show signs of slowing down. That mid-level ridge redevelops or re-centres to the south of the circulation, and that makes sure the cyclone doesn't, I was going to say the F word, doesn't stuff around. It just wants to keep moving, all right? Doesn't want to stop and think about life. It just wants to keep going. So here it pushes through Katherine. So Katherine goes through a period of 6 hours or so of really intense weather. And remember, the western side, on the way in, the cyclone's going to produce most of its weather. So on the way to Katherine, not once it goes past Katherine. Once it goes past Katherine, things are going to settle down very quickly. And then, as I said, we're watching very closely closely to see if it gets off the coast here for 6 or 12 hours. If it does, it might be well put together enough to redevelop into a tropical cyclone fairly rapidly in this area. And you can see there the system's producing, with that brown ocean effect, the system's producing good winds and good structure all through this area. And you can see pushing through the JBG on Sunday and then into the North Kimberley. Now, if it spends any more than about 6 to 12 hours out there, game on for a cyclone again. All right. And then, of course, longer term, we don't know what it's going to do in WA, so it's probably not very helpful starting to speculate there with regards to rainfall effects and wind effects for WA just yet. But understanding that we're very highly confident that it's going to push through Queensland, and then it's going to push through the Gulf, and then it's going to push through the Northern Territory. That part we're very confident on. What we're not confident on is whether it can get out here in the JBG, or whether it'll stay inland of the JBG. And then we're obviously not confident longer term down the line about what part of WA needs to be on the lookout for this thing in the long term. So you can see it's only a very violent but short period of bad weather. All right, so you can see very, very much the systems creating a lot of the rain. And one of the key things, and we talked about this in our members video, is in our members month ahead video, is there's no monsoon attached to this. This is a cyclone on its own. It's doing its own thing in its own environment. There's no major monsoon feeding it. And so therefore you can see the rainfall around Darwin, around Warrawai, generally around the Arnhem district. If you're not in the core, you're not getting a hell of a lot of rain. All right, so just understand there, this isn't a monsoon that's attached to the cyclone where everyone gets pummeled with rain. It's very much a regional event. It's just that a lot of regions are copying the same event. All right, so the idea here is going to be if you're not anywhere near the core convection and you don't have a big mountain range around you like North Queensland does, you're not going to see a hell of a lot of rain out of this. So I just want to make sure that Darwin folk are very aware of that. Otherwise, they're going to come into this thinking they're going to get pummeled, and chances are they won't see too much out of it. All right, so you've got to be inside the core convection of the system and or the secondary feeder band activity. All right, so that's our on-the-ground effects, folks. That's what we're expecting to see on the ground. They're the timings of when we expect to see stuff on the ground. I'm hoping that's as comprehensive as you need, but I'm sure there'll be some questions there, so let's go through them. Before we do questions, folks, just remember we are supported by the generosity of our subscribers. So if you can afford it, if you like the detail that we go into here, we do that for the regions all the time during the wet season. So please consider a subscription, weatheriq.com.au/subscribe. And you can see there that our subscription options don't break the bank. $32.95 a year. Not going to break your bank. Even the most expensive one at $69.95 a year isn't going to break your bank, folks. So if you can support us, we'd be much appreciative. If you can't support us financially, give this video a thumbs up, a thumbs down. I don't care if you don't like it. Thumbs it down. I don't care. It just helps the algorithm and gets the word out. If we get heaps of thumbs down, a lot of people will go, oh, why are they getting so many thumbs down? And they'll go check it out. So it helps us out both ways. Oh, and our major sponsor on the top left, Fair Dinkum Builds. We thank them for their sponsorship. And if you're in the market for a shed safe accredited shed, which I dare say a couple of sheds may be relocated if they're not shed safe accredited, check them out. All right, let's go through some of the questions. No more for Catherine or Daly. Piss. Oh, please, says Rebecca. Sorry, Rebecca, I've got some bad news for you there. As we just talked about, there is a fair bit more coming for Catherine and the Daly area. What we'd hope for is maybe that the system might pass maybe a touch further south. And if it can do that, you might miss the worst of it. But right now, it's not looking all that flash, mate. I've got to be honest with you. It does look as though you're going to be in this violent little period of weather. It's not going to last very long. That's the good part about it. But it's going to be 1 to 200, maybe up to 300 mils that you really don't want to see right now. And the timing of that, once again, if we're looking for timing for Catherine and Daly, we're probably looking at Sunday, Saturday night into Sunday. All right, that's the timing of when we'd be expecting to see some of the worst stuff there for Catherine. Hi from Mariba. Hi, Amy. Not much there for Mariba. You're on the south side of the cyclone, yes, but the south side of the cyclone, this cyclone's a bit different to the normal ones. It's creating most of its rain on the northern side, and the rain on the south side of the cyclone is going to be on the mountain ranges, Amy. So Mariba's going to certainly get a few showers, but we're not expecting really heavy stuff. Hey, Justin Dixon, gun show nipper. Yes, mate. Yeah. I was a bit late today. I had to take the dog out for a walk, and she wanted to walk a little bit more than she normally does. Normally, she's the one dragging me back home, but this time she wanted to sniff and do all sorts of things that dogs do. So I was a bit late today. Procrastinator says, tut, 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 tut. Yes, it's all about the tut again. Delwyn, hi from Doomadgee. Doomadgee, that's a place we don't get a few shout outs from a lot of the time. And so if we take a look there for Morno, I think Morno is the closest we've got to Doomadgee. There's Doomadgee there. So the good thing here is that the cyclone is not producing a lot of rain on its southern side. So for Doomadgee, we're probably looking at a system that's creating a few showers, absolutely, but the heavy rain aspect is probably going to be north. And even Morno, it's probably going to be north of Morno once it gets over into this area. So obviously Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're looking for some showers. So Friday, with the system pushing into the western parts of the Cape and through the Gulf, we'll start to see a few showers there for Doomadgee. Saturday we'll see quite a number of showers there for Doomadgee, and so too for Karumba, Burketown, Normanton, all these areas. Heavy rainfall primarily going to be north and west of Morno, and then as we go into Sunday, we're going to see quite a few showers on the secondary flow, right? That convergence flow, and once again that's going to be highly coastal, but because there's no big blocking mountain ranges, we're going to see a fair bit of that progress inland as well, and so Doomadgee will probably get a few of those showers as well. But at this stage, nothing that should be flooding Doomadgee out over the course. And the same will apply for Burketown, Normanton, Karumba, and those sort of areas around the Gulf too. We are expecting to see rain for sure. We'd be mad to say otherwise, but just nothing flooding wise, and certainly no intensity of winds expected through the region. So you're pretty safe there at Doomadgee. Great work, Nitso, says Michael. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for tuning in. Catherine Griffin-Art, hi from Darwin. Hi, Catherine. At this stage, Darwin's not a real focus area for us. At this stage, if there is going to be major effects, they're likely to be south of Darwin. But as the low pushes westwards, or as the cyclone/remnant low pushes westwards, it will excite the atmosphere over Darwin. So we will see a period there, I'm sure, of enhanced shower activity as we go into Sunday and maybe even Monday before it quickly buggers off to the west. Orville, there you go, Nitso. Dr. Solomon will cure all your troubles. Oh yeah, we had a scammer on there. Please don't anyone call Dr. Solomon. Dr. Solomon's a fake doctor and they'll just scam you. So anyone reading that rubbish about Dr. Solomon, I'll have to ban that person. Amelia. I'll have to ban Amelia. Just please don't call Dr. Solomon. All right. Hi from a yacht at Airlie Beach on the Whitsundays. Hey, Mahisha. Yeah, not much going on for the Whitsundays, mate. Just a lot of wind. The Whitsundays, I can't even see them getting a truck ton of rain out of this. So I do see maybe a couple of showers on the Whitsundays for sure. But it's all about the wind. It's just going to be windy all week. Just looking at the Whitsundays there. Yeah, just not much going on at all there, mate. Sunday, I think we've got an upper trough down in southern Queensland on Sunday, and that might bring us a couple of showers far north as the Mackay Whitsundays area. But I'm not seeing any evidence whatsoever of any significant shower impacts on the Whitsundays, rain impacts on the Mackay Whitsundays coast. And look, even Townsville's probably a little too far south of that. But you can see there, southeasterly is going to stick around till at least the weekend, and then they'll start to ease for a day or so, and then they'll kick back in over the course of early next week. So it's just a southeasterly-a-thon for this section of coastline for ages. And remember, we do have another low that develops out that in the Coral Sea, so that'll keep the southeasterlies humming across much of central and eastern Queensland. So you can see that second low that we talked about staying well east of the coast, but just enhancing the pressure gradient squeeze, so enhancing the southeasterly flow on the southern and central Queensland coast. Okay, so yeah, just all about that. Chrissy, the winds on the Atherton Tablelands, any idea? And thank you. All right, let's have a look, Chrissy. I don't remember anything catching my eye when I was looking at this earlier. They're going to be southeasterlies, and we do know that parts of the tablelands are susceptible to some pretty strong southeasterlies, but overall, I'm not seeing too much there. Let's have a look. Maybe I didn't have a proper look earlier. So let's have a look here. Make sure that we're not talking rubbish. All right. So you obviously know that between Atherton and Raven, so in the southeasterly, we do get some pretty enhanced sort of easterly flows. That's a pretty common knowledge thing there on the tablelands, that there is that area around that Atherton to Ravenshoe region where we do see enhanced winds. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they put those big windmills up there on the ridge near Atherton and near Tolga. So you can see that they're being predicted by the model as well. And yeah, so strong southeasterlies over the course of the next couple of days. As our cyclone comes in, you can see this is how strong the winds get. So for Cairns, they're getting up around 30 knots, gusting to 30. And you can see there for the Atherton area, we zoom into the tablelands for you. You can see there for Atherton, you are starting to get those 30 knot southeasters there, right? So we are going to see 30, maybe even 35 knot gusts through the region. So, you know, it does get windy on Thursday in anticipation of the cyclone, so ahead of the cyclone, and then you can see some pretty strong winds extending further west of the tablelands, and then once the flow turns a bit more easterly, we should see those winds settle down a fair bit through the region, okay? But that lead up, that last little bit before the cyclone hits the coast, the winds are going to get quite strong on the tablelands, so just be careful working at heights and things like that. But that's about it. Hippie says, watching your earlier videos and some of your facial expressions, do you ever think, damn, I should have added this or should have also added this? Yeah, sometimes I do, Hippie, but unless, look, if I've forgotten something and it's really important, and I think the subscribers definitely need to know about it, I'll go back and actually re-edit the video. Like if I think it's that important, I'll go back and re-edit it. But sometimes I'll just miss little things and I'll go, nah, it's not worth re-editing the whole video for that little one thing that I might have missed. That's why I try and sort of pre-plan every one of my forecasts. That's why I wake up at 4, start looking at the models and ready for that first forecast release around 7 o'clock in the morning. But I've also pre-planned what I want to talk about in each particular region. So there is a little bit of planning involved in what I want to discuss. So I try and make sure I don't miss those. But sometimes as I'm looking at stuff, new things come to light, or between that time where I might have woken up and checked the model at 4 a.m. and by the time your forecast is out at 11 a.m. or 12 p.m., something might have changed fundamentally, and I sometimes look at that in real time and go, oh, hang on, that's not what I wanted to talk about, but we need to talk about this. So, yeah, sometimes I do think that, mate, but a lot of the time if I've missed something big, I'll go back and actually re-edit the video before I release it. BJ, hey, mate, we'll subscribe Friday. Oh, good on you, BJ. Thank you very much, mate. Much appreciated. Yeah, very much appreciated. Mick, love your work, Nitso. Thanks, mate. No worries, Mick. Better drag the barbecue off the veranda. This system's going to be a duck drencher. Yeah, it depends where you are, Matt. It depends where you are, mate. As I say, I'm not seeing huge numbers on the North Tropical Coast at this stage. I am seeing big numbers. Look, if you're just north of where it crosses, I am seeing big numbers for you in very, very quick time. Should Groot Island be worried? Yeah, Dexter, I would be certainly paying attention to this one on Groot Island. We would be expecting the system to get within about 100, 150 kilometres of Groot Island, either to the north or to the south, or maybe even a direct hit, right? So it's still a little bit far away. Remember, the system hasn't even started moving west yet. So we just need to see the trajectory. And then if you come back Wednesday night and ask me, should group be worried, I'll be able to give you a better explanation. User generated 1, 2, 3. Will it hit Brisbane? That's a silly question, not even worth answering. Marilyn, why is it a fast cyclone? Marilyn, it's a fast cyclone because of the steering mechanism in play. And the steering mechanism is really, really obvious. So when we look at our steering winds for a weak to strong tropical cyclone, you can see that because we don't have a monsoon, so this cyclone a month ago in the same spot would have been a much slower moving thing. It would have been moving at 5 to 10 kilometres an hour. And the reason it would have been moving slowly is we would have had a monsoon on the north side and we would have had the ridge on the south side. But with this system, we've only got the ridge on the south side. There is no monsoon whatsoever anywhere near Australia right now. And there won't be while this system's tracking westwards. So the only thing steering this cyclone is the mid-level ridge. And you can see the mid-level ridge is very, very strong. You can see that by the colour. You see how we've got lots of colour. We've got green, yellow and red underneath the system. So that tells us that the system is going to be moving and motoring on its way to the west. So the lack of any counter steering mechanisms through the deep layer atmosphere means that this system is just all the way to the west. It's one of those big long track and westerlies. It's a track that we haven't seen. Oh geez, when was the last one that we would have seen that's gone through 3 states? Geez, it's been a long time since we've seen one that moves this far to the west without sort of recurving. And this one very clearly is doing that at this stage. The only doubt would have been this period here on Thursday where we see this down here around Brisbane Gympie, this upper trough. So that would be the only time we would have been a little bit doubtful. And that would have been only if the system was located east of Willis Island still. But you can see as the trough pushes in, the system's already hit the coast. So there's no doubt whatsoever there that the system's just going to keep going west here for a long, long time. Okay? But that's why it's moving so quickly. Layer Cake, thanks so much for the hard work you put into your fantastic explanations and detailed forecasts. Thanks very much, Layer Cake. Thank you very much for your support and your comment on YouTube. That helps drive the algorithm too. But thank you very much for watching, and I'm glad you take a bit of value out of it. What drives the speed of these systems, Nitso? Reese, we just talked about it, mate. So the speed of the steering flow between about 1.5 and about 7 kilometres up in the atmosphere, or 8 kilometres up in the atmosphere. That's what drives which direction they go. The really strong ones, we start the steering at about 3 to 4 kilometres up in the atmosphere and we keep it going till 11 kilometres up in the atmosphere. That's the really strong and powerful cyclones. They're steered by those levels. But we look at how strong the steering is from the dominant steering mechanism, and then what we look for is there anything that might be counter-steering the system in the other way, moving it in the other way? And in this situation, there's just nothing else to take it away from us, all right? So nothing else to take it in the other direction. So it's clearly going to move west, and it's clearly going to move west quickly. Just like the next Coral Sea Cyclone, the one that's coming in 7 to 10 days' time, we can clearly see that that's going to stay out to sea because look at what's going on out here. All right, you can see there's just nothing that's going to be trying to pull that into the coastline, right? So, and you can see there, at worst, the thing's going to be moving north to south from out here, but more likely northwest to southeast, right? So those sort of things there, and you can see there's not much counter steer, so there's nothing else to drive it in any other direction. So, yeah, those are the sort of things we can see a fair way ahead of time and be confident in. Hi from Coranda, missed the start, but I'll rewatch. Yeah, I'd be rewatching that first sort of 15 minutes or so, Louise, because that's where we talk about the Cairns coastline and how they'll fare from it. Hi mate, few showers for Cairns. Yeah, Aidan, you just got a couple of 100 millimetres, bud. Most of Cairns got 150, 200 mils the other day. But yes, you will get quite a few showers. I'd expect to see some heavy rain at times for Cairns, especially as and after the cyclone has hit the coast during during the back end of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even Sunday. We'll start to see it lifting off to the north, mate. But that's when I'd expect Cairns to get some of its heavier rainfall. A few showers would be the lowest I'd expect. I'd be expecting triple figures plus over the course of the weekend, mate. Michael Small, will I ever get my fencing and landscaping done? I'd like to give you a major sponsor. Smalley. Hey, Smalley. Smalley's a good mate of mine. It's good to see him. Good to see him tune in. He's not a real weather nerd, so I reckon he's just in here to talk a bit of shit. Annie, thank you. No worries, Annie. Mike, will this push across northern WA? Yes, Mike, we talked about that, mate, but it's just too early to talk about the other part of WA. So it will push across northern WA, but we just don't know what part of WA it might push down into longer term. All right, so clear evidence that it's going to push west across WA. West across northern WA. So you can see that there. All right, so clear. I'll just fast forward to the important bit there. All right, so you can see clear evidence that it pushes west off WA, and we're seeing clear evidence of that on the Google Weather Lab as well. So if you take a look here at the Weather Lab, right, so clear evidence that it gets off the coast of WA, right, but then also not clear whether it comes back on the coast of WA, and if it does it come onto the Pilbara coast? Does it come onto the Gascoyne, and does it come onto the Central West? Is it still a cyclone? There's so many question marks once it goes west across northern WA. But it will create very heavy rainfall for the northern Kimberley. No doubt about that whatsoever. How far south in the northern Kimberley will depend on whether it goes west or whether it goes west-southwest, as to whether or not places like Broome and Derby get involved. But for now, clear westward motion, continuing west across the NT and continuing west across the northern edge of WA. Longer term, though, don't ask me, because we just don't know. Okay, we don't know what happens once it gets off into the Browse Basin here. We don't know if it's going to keep going west or whether the ridge will break down, and we could be looking at a pretty significant cyclone threat down in the West Pilbara. We don't know that yet. Reese, it's still modelling though for the most of it. A lot changes from day to day, and to your credit, you make this announced. Yeah, Reese, it is, mate. But look, as far as steering goes, yeah, you can never take anything for granted in the Coral Sea. The Coral Sea is one of those. It humbles you every time you think you've got it figured out. It throws something at you, and you go, shit, I shouldn't have been as confident as I was. It doesn't do it, in all fairness, it doesn't do it as much these days as it used to. But we've seen many cyclones that have accelerated west and then suddenly put the skids on and done something weird that we didn't expect. We just don't see that as often these days because the modelling has improved so much. So we don't get situations where we're genuinely shocked by a sudden change of direction. There's not too many times that happens in the Coral Sea now. I'm not saying it won't, but it just doesn't happen very frequently now. It used to happen all the time in the Coral Sea, where something would start moving west at 30 k's an hour, then suddenly stop, and then suddenly move southeast, and we're sort of, scratching our heads going, how the freaking hell did that happen? Now we've got really good modelling, especially in the upper level atmosphere. Our ability to model the upper level part of the atmosphere has improved a lot more than our ability to model rainfall. So rainfall still lags a long way behind our upper level atmospheric modelling. So our upper level atmospheric modeling's gotten very good. Lots of data inputs from planes and things like that go into the model, and satellite, of course. So we're getting a lot better at modelling the upper atmosphere. We're still struggling with the rain, and I don't know if we've improved a hell of a lot rainfall modelling, but from a cyclones genuinely surprising us perspective, yeah, probably not as much. Doesn't happen as frequently anymore. The one place that I would say to you it does still happen is the Northern Territory and the Gulf. These areas here are notoriously unpredictable, are really unpredictable. We've got shit data from this entire region. fed into the models. So it's really shit data, and a lot of the time the steering mechanisms up here are very, very weak. All right, and they're usually steering from two completely opposite directions. So anything that's in the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, the Timor Sea, the Arafura, and the Gulf of Carpentaria, it's an absolute nightmare still. And once again, it comes down to really shit data inputs into our computer models. And because of those really shit data inputs, the models are about as useful as tits on a bull or an ashtray on a motorbike, you know. So they really are poor in this area. Of all of Australia, this is the poorest area that they perform in. Thankfully, not many people live in this area, but that's cold comfort for those of you that do. Bella, would you say the cyclone season is almost over? No, I wouldn't. We're still seeing lots of cyclone signals into into April. So we're still seeing evidence, Bella, of a bit of cyclone activity. Sorry, my camera's moving. Shouldn't be moving. All right. So I'm not seeing evidence that this is potentially the last one of the season. Okay, that if that's your question. I'm not seeing that. Monica, that's the one. Annalise, yes, Monica was the similar three-stater. Yep. And it happened just after Larry. You are 100% correct. Yep, Monica's the one that really rings a bell. Look, this isn't going to be Monica in terms of intensity, but yeah, that sort of track, right? Long track from the Cape across the top end. I think Monica was a bit further north, though, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, generally, east to west, long tracker, and then eventually came off the coast of WA. So yeah. Monica was the one. Luke, the ground is so saturated in Cairns. Is Wednesday best day to mow, as in break from the rain before it hits? I think, Tuesday or Wednesday. But if you're saying it's saturated, give it till Wednesday so it can, it gets another day to dry out. But listen, the problem with Cairns, or not the problem, but when we've got a big, strong southeaster, Cairns could get an isolated shower at any time, right? So you can't say it's going to be fully dry for Cairns because there's a chance there on that southeasterly flow, you're always going to get a chance for a shower. So that was for Luke. Matt, finally subscribed. Now I'm living in in the Cape York Peninsula. Been a tight-ass southerner since the OCC days. Thanks for everything, pal. No worries, Matt. Glad to have you back with us. OCC days, those were the days. Will you ever go back to chasing? Louise, if Weather IQ blows up and I can employ someone to do my job during the wet season, I would go back to chasing in a heartbeat, mate. I love the technical side of this and looking at why things are happening and understanding the physics behind it all. But there's nothing better than being out and experiencing a middle of a Cat 4 or a Cat 3 or a Cat 5 gets a bit scary. But Cat 4, Cat 3s, Cat 2s, you know, the Cat 2s and 1s are real fun cyclones to be in. I shouldn't say that publicly, but they are fun cyclones. You got to be a dickhead to get hurt in a Cat 1 or a Cat 2. And look, sometimes we are dickheads, but yeah, you've got to be a pretty major dickhead or really clueless to get hurt in a Cat 1 or Cat 2. Or, you're trying to drive through floodwaters, in which case, once again, Darwinism. So, those ones are fun to chase. Cat 3s and 4s, they're scary to chase. Oh, not scary to chase, they're exhilarating to chase because you got to do everything right. You're going to get some wicked data and some wicked footage. But you know that if you're a dickhead, you could die. All right, that's the key in the Cat 3 and a Cat 4. Cat 1 and Cat 2, I mean, you really have to have your number ticked off that day to die in one of those, no matter how silly you are. But, 3s and 4s, they're the sweet spot because they're exhilarating. It's like skydiving when you're out there. You feel like you're weightless. The air basically can carry you. You just put your arms out and the air's just holding you. You can just let go of your feet and the air will hold you up. It's pretty incredible stuff. So Cat 3s and 4s are the sweet spot. And then Cat 1s and 2s are fun. Cat 5, you hunker down and you stay indoors. You're not a dickhead in a Cat 5. You've got to take Mother Nature seriously in a Cat 5. Otherwise, you will die. So that's the way we sort of. But yes, in answer to your question, will I ever go back to chasing? I tell you what, if all you people subscribe to me, I'll be able to do it. But at the moment, we don't have the subscriber numbers to justify putting someone else on full time with me. Dylan does a great job when I need him to fill in, but I don't have the. Reese, thanks, Nitzo. You're my favourite weatherman. No worries, Reese. Thanks for joining us, mate. Adam, thanks, mate. Greatly appreciate everything. No worries, Adam. Mike, thanks, mate. You are the source of info for the business I work for. Been a member for years in Karratha, and you've nailed it every time, usually ahead of the Port Authority, Rio and Woodside. Oh, that's a big statement. Thanks, Mike. And glad you fared okay out of the last one. I think you were in that Karratha area for the last one. Mitch, Cyclone Mitch. And I think you guys didn't cop as bad as you were expected to cop. So I think you got away with one there. Most of the Pilbara did with that one. All right, I think that's all of our questions. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anyone on YouTube, folks. Sometimes people pay, they send us a YouTube super chat. So I just want to make sure I haven't missed one of those, because the last thing I want to do is people pay, give us $1 or $2 and ask a question, and then I've missed it. I feel shit. I feel terrible when that happens. Oh, we do have some questions from there, don't we? Just having a look from YouTube. Thanks so much. No super chats, but just some questions I didn't see on my little chat thing. I was planning to go fishing layer cake in the Tully Gorge on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Are you certain about the rain expectations for Tully? Fishing. I mean, the winds will start to die down over the weekend. So once the cyclone crosses the coast, I think Saturday, Sunday, the winds will be better. But Tully Gorge, there's going to be a lot of rain. Yeah, lots of showers, lots of rain activity there, mate. G'day from Innisfail. Love your work. Thanks, JCB. Subscribe. This is a no bullshit service. Look forward to seeing what might eventuate next week in CQ. Thanks, Nitzo. No worries, mate. No worries at all. Thank you very much for your endorsement. Right. I think that's all we've got. Thanks very much for watching. Listen, I'll be with you in 2 nights. So we'll do them 2 nightly. So normally we do them 3 nightly, but because we got a cyclone on the way, and the cyclone's not just going to affect Queenslanders, it's going to affect NT and WA down the track. So I think it's important that we keep you up to date every 2 nights. Obviously, subscribers will go through the full rigmarole every single day with all the forecasts. But for those of you in the public, every 2 nights with us. So our next one, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Thanks very much for watching, folks. We'll talk again soon.